Every successful person got there by going through tough times. Success is a hard-ass teacher who likes to knock you around along that journey. You know, it takes real guts to not give up and keep going. We'll hear stories about failures and how these leaders flip the script to create success. I'm John Schultz. Join me and let's discover how success is never really overnight. Welcome to the John Schultz podcast. Very excited for this episode. I'll be interviewing Mike Tepedino, who has been a friend for over 30 years in the real estate industry, a prominent real estate executive who's done so many amazing things to push our industry forward, push the people around him forward. He's an amazing leader, and he recently just started a new venture called Blue Light Capital, which we'll be discussing, along with all the other amazing accomplishments and the grit and the fight that he had to go through to get to where he is today. So, Michael, welcome to the podcast. I'm excited we're doing this.
Thrilled to be here, John. Thanks for having me.
This is why I do it, to have people like you on and, learn what it is to go through all the journey and actually get there and keep moving on. So, we go all the way back because I find with all these podcasts, a lot of what the guests have learned to do as they got older were these moments when they were young. So I want to start out with saying, how would your parents describe little Mike Tepedino?
Wow. My parents would probably describe me as a good kid. I was a good kid. I listened to my parents. I was a rule follower, probably. I don't think I caused them a lot of trouble as a kid. And I think they would probably say he was a good young man. I mean, I don't know. It's a great question. I don't know what they'd say. I didn't cause many problems. Would be sort of a takeaway on what they would say.
And when you were younger, right? I mean, we all have what we sort of thought we were going to be, do. We had our little challenges. As you were growing up, was it sports? Like what got you focused? What do you think helped create your discipline, right, that carried through your life during your younger years?
Well, it's a great question, John. I think all of us have these sort of defining moments in your life that sort of change your trajectory, right? And I think for me, there were probably two defining moments. One was when I was in 8th grade, my parents took me out of public school and tossed me into a private school. And I didn't know it at the time, but that was probably a singular defining moment. And then, at the end of my freshman year in college, I'd say was a really defining moment because, I probably got a little carried away with my freshman year. And my father at the time advised me and said, hey, this doesn't work. And really at the end of my freshman year at age 19, I'd say this crazy discipline showed up for the first time. It was probably always in me as a kid, but it really surfaced in my sophomore year in college where I became incredibly regimented and disciplined almost in a freaky kind of way.
Yeah.
We started with the whole exercise program and sleeping right and just trying to, move towards a healthier, disciplined lifestyle.
No, and I know that about you. You're disciplined to this day, which is amazing, right? From everything you eat to your routine. You're very routine. But listen, you were thrown out of your routine, right, when you were in grammar school. And to move everything into a whole nother school with new friends in that grade level is not easy. So what was the challenge of that for you? And what do you think you learned from that as far as what was inside you, from meeting new friends? What do you think you actually garnered from that experience?
Well, I think anytime any of us are forced into new environments where you're sort of an outsider coming in, your personality and your interpersonal skills are going to be called on because it's for the first time you're trying to reconvene with a bunch of people you don't know.
Yep.
And so I think it's actually healthy to get tossed out of your comfort zone and into a new environment, because it forces you to get along with others. And I think if you're able to get along with people that you don't know and cultivate friendships with people you don't know, that'll serve you well over long periods of time.
100%. And listen, especially in the business of really any business, right? When you're young, to go out and meet people in your industry and not be afraid to ask questions and be your own person is so critical. And this 19-year-old moment, right? And I remember mine. You'll laugh, but I remember ordering the Tony Robbins 30 cassette tape thing. Because I was lost. I had no idea what I wanted to do. A lot of my friends all, it looked like it was so organized for them, and it was getting me down. And I remember ordering that and listening to all of them through a 2-week period. And that just changed my mindset, right? So when you were 19, you said the discipline mindset came into play. But why? It could have easily gone the other way. What got you actually really there? I mean, it's easy for our parents to tell us anything that we should do. We usually rebel. What was your defining thought on why you thought you actually needed to go there?
It was a tremendous fear of outright failure. So it was a fear of failure. And my dad was a social worker, so I came up from very humble beginnings. I didn't come up in a place where there was a lot of money around the kitchen table, right? And I went to college with a lot of affluent people who were in a different they were coming from a different place. And for me, it was like, okay, if I'm going to become someone or something, I need to get disciplined around how I run my life, how I lead my life, and how I go about my business. And, around that time and a little earlier, John, to your point about Tony Robbins, we're going back a long time, but I used to collect quotes from great people, and I would write them down and I'd put them in a shoebox. And when I needed a little motivation and I needed to get fired up, or I found myself slipping or not directionally going the way I wanted, I'd pull out the shoebox and I'd read these great quotes for 10 minutes and I'd get inspired by them. And the shoebox may still be someplace, but over time I collected hundreds of them and I threw them in this shoebox. And I'd go to my room and I'd read them, and I'd come out of the room and I'd be all fired up again. So I know today that sounds crazy.
Shoebox, I hope you kept that shoebox. I'm hoping you kept that shoebox. No, it's nowhere to be found. It's in your head now, which is good. So, all right. So your father, humble beginnings, social worker. Well, which is awesome, right? You were around someone that had this thing to want to help people. Both your parents. That was their, me meeting them. I felt that myself. But business and getting through college is one thing, but then it's like, how do you figure out that next move, which we all know is just trial and error, right? Like, it's not your last decision, but you still got to make it. So how did you develop an interest in real estate at a young age? Like, what were some of the things that you were put in front of, or did you have mentors that sort of gave you a feel for this? Like, how did you get to make that first, of many decisions in your career?
Well, I think it goes back to my childhood again. My dad used to take me into the city. We lived in Brooklyn, and we would come into New York, and I was fascinated by these skyscrapers. We'd walk down 6th Avenue, we'd walk down Park Avenue. I literally would be staring up at these buildings saying wow, I can't believe somebody actually built this.
Right.
Somebody actually constructed this building, and I was fascinated with it, relatively early. And when I got into college, I knew that I wanted to be in the real estate business. I had no idea what part of the business, but I knew that I wanted to be in the business. And when I got my MBA and I got out of, I went from college straight to business school, which was not a normal trajectory, but I immediately went into the real estate business directly upon graduation.
It's amazing. I remember my father, the same thing. He was in real estate though, right? So I was dragged around to his stuff, but I always remember, as a kid being fascinated about buildings, the same thing. I say people would probably look for where's the nearest candy store. And I'm looking at malls and, large shopping centers and looking at the brands that were in them at a really young age. So it's amazing how something is inside us that we don't ever realize, and that we let it out and try it, which is good. So you went to graduate school, right? Was there any mentors at that point? You said you went right in. What was some of the mentors?
I had a mentor in business school.
Okay.
And the sort of the Mike Tepedino rule is that, over the course of your life, you do meet 3 or 4 people along the way who change the trajectory of what happens to you.
So let's talk about that, because if there's one line of, if I took all 86 podcasts and put them in a book of quotes, that what you just said is what is the same thing for every single guest. They had someone that tapped them on the shoulder, that pulled them, that actually wasn't afraid to tell them to go in a direction that maybe they weren't thinking about. So how did that form for you? And then how did you deal with that once it was conveyed?
So could not agree more about the people that tap you on the shoulder. And you get tapped a few times in your life, probably 3 times. If you talk to people that have succeeded, they'd say there was three or 4 times in their life someone came to them. So the first time someone came to me was the dean of the business school. So the dean of the business school was a guy named Arthur Taylor. And at the time, Fordham was not widely regarded as a very good business school. It had a weak reputation. And Arthur had just taken over the school as the dean. And I went into his office as some brash 21-year-old guy, with a laundry list of complaints on, why the school was a second-rate school. And about a minute or 2 into my soliloquy, he stopped me dead in my tracks and said, "Don't you think I know all that?" and he said, "Do you know who I am?" And of course I didn't. I hadn't read up on him. I just knew he was the dean of the business school. And Arthur was the youngest president in the history of CBS.
Oh, wow.
And he sat on the board. He was 37 years old when he was the president of CBS. And he sat on the board at the time of about 18 Fortune 500 companies. And he looked at me right in the eyes and said, "You can either leave or you can stick around, because my intention is to change all that stuff." And the next morning I got a call from his office, and they offered me an opportunity to be his dean's assistant. And during that time, I did all of Arthur's dirty work. I wrote his speeches. I got him coffee. I did whatever he needed done. And there were 2 takeaways from me from that experience, John. One was because he was in media, he was a brilliant marketing person. And at the time, in his way, and what his way was, every Friday afternoon at 1:00 before he left, he took 50 cards on his personal stationery, and he would write to people. He would write, "Hey, John, happy anniversary. Hey, John, happy birthday to Allison." Yeah, he would write these 1 or 2 deep sentences, but they were all and then he'd ask me to put them in the mail, and then he'd leave. And he did it every Friday of his life, 50 of them. And at the end of it, he said, "Do you know how many people I touch every month with these personal little notes?" So he was marketing before marketing became a thing, before people were doing podcasts. And at the end of my time with him, he sat me down and said, "What do you want to do with your life?" I said, "Well, I want to be in the real estate business." He said, "Okay, great. We're going to make that happen." And he helped me get my first job in the business, which was working for a Travelers insurance company, underwriting real estate loans. And I, was doing that for them in Northern Virginia, which wasn't part of my program as a Brooklyn kid. But I got a job working for Travelers that he happened to sit on the board of directors of, which I didn't know at the time. And he got me started in the business. So that was, I would say, life-altering moment number one.
It's amazing. I love that whole note thing. I mean, it's funny. You'll read an email, you'll read a text. When I get a personal note from someone, I have a box. You didn't keep your box, but I've kept my box of every personal note I've ever received since I've really been in business, right? And I look at them every couple of years because I keep the box where I can see it. And I find like the little things matter. Like those things make you remember. So I remember the people that send me those notes, and then I'll give them a call. I'll see what's going up. And it's I don't do it as much as I should, but I do that. I think it's an amazing trait, along with many others that, make you more human to why we're all here together, right? Not just, trying to get business or do business. People want to be around people that care and are human. So,
and I think it's become a lost art. It's become a lost art because of the text messages and the way people communicate with one another now. It's just different, right? We live in a different world. But the concept to remember a good friend's birthday, or to remember his wife's birthday, or to remember their anniversary, or to know some milestone of when their children graduated from college. I mean, this is what friendships are all about.
100%. And that's what people care most about anyway. So people should remember that. So you're at Travelers. He helped you do that tap on the shoulder into Travelers. You're underwriting. What do you feel you learned there? What was the challenges of what you thought you wanted to be? And as we know, work is work. Like, what got you to stay and to then move into, the brokerage business, which we'll talk about?
So, like every young man, getting into the real estate business, you want to be a developer, right? Everyone, you go back to the building on 6th Avenue and say, well, I want to be that person. So I'll just do this for 2 years, and then I'll go become that person, right? Which of course is, naive as a 21-year-old guy could be, right? Because you're not going to become that person. Certainly not after 2 years. Certainly not after 2 years. You're not.
Right. Exactly. Yeah.
So at the time, Travelers had the worst loan portfolio in the U.S. That 38% of their book was non-performing. So when I got into the business in the late 1980s, the only thing that I knew and the only thing that I learned about real estate was what could go wrong. And I spent the first 6 years of my life doing loan restructurings and working through bankruptcies and foreclosures and understanding the really dark side of our business of, vacant buildings and what desperate developers will do when they're about to get wiped out, and the adversarial relationships that can develop between lender and owner. And, I didn't know it at the time, but that 6 years was the most valuable part of my life, and it turned out to be the foundation for what occurred afterwards.
It's true. I always tell people, we should start it when things get better. Like I've started 2-3 companies, and it's always been in the worst time because it's where everyone's on a level playing field at that point, and it's a reset. And people will, plus people are looking for what's new and how to sort of navigate it. And I find that when people are at that point, they'll actually talk to you more than they ever would talk to you, right? Because you want to get through the problem and you want to solve it. So I find that fascinating. Plus, you went through so many problems and gyrations of what could be. I'm sure it totally helped you on being a better negotiator, a better listener. And what do you think the key skill, besides what you said, the most valuable, if you could pick a skill that you got from that, what would it be?
Just understanding the downside of a
Yep.
deal, just understanding the downside of a deal, right? I mean, we all get into deals and we all look at these pro formas and, we're all conditioned to, what goes right. And, of course, those pro formas look great because we wrote them, right? And
Right.
this is all this great stuff that's going to happen to us. But I think, all smart investors, they have that in their drawer. Of course, everything can go right. But I think they make decisions based on everything that could go wrong.
100%.
So I think
With believing in your plan, but yes, you always
believing in your plan
Right.
and the great entrepreneurs obviously believe in their plan. Otherwise,
Yeah.
that's what makes them great. But
Yeah.
in their back pocket somewhere, they understand fully well what can go wrong.
Yep. No, listen, it's like any, tech investment I've been in, real estate. It never ends what you thought it was going to be. There's always pivots and changes, and we can only control the environment of the building. We can't control the market. We can't control what's going around in the world. So you always have to, know you're going to have to make some moves, and that's what we do. That's why we're still in it. That's why we're still here. All right, so you're at Travelers, like we said, and you weren't going to go be that developer in 2 years, but what made you switch to brokerage? Like, here's a great company, stable. You sort of had great experience in the bad times. Why wouldn't you ride them in the good times? And like, what made you make that move? Was there another tap on the shoulder? Was it something inside your gut that you wanted to be more your own person? Because being in brokerage, you're sort of, your own little LLC every day.
Yeah, so I think that I had this burning desire to be a master of my own destiny.
Okay.
And so if you go back to the developer deal, being a broker is as close as you can be to being a developer without risking in capital.
Yes.
Right? So I said to myself, well, I'm going to take all this risk to become a commission salesman.
Yep.
But I'm okay making that bet because I'm just betting on myself. And I'm totally fine doing that. And it kind of made me feel like I was almost becoming a developer without becoming a developer.
No, that makes sense. I totally get it.
So that was my decision tree to get into brokerage when I was 29 and said, wow, I can be a master of my own destiny. I can sort of control my income. And I sort of like this, eat what you kill proposition. It seemed all very appealing to me. So I wasn't scared off by that. And you spent a lifetime in brokerage, and it takes a certain personality to want to be in it. You gotta have a headset that says, I embrace being a commission salesman.
Well, I felt like no one could limit my beliefs, my ability, because I was going to go out and, be able to do it on my, not my own, but like there was no limits. So that's totally was inside me. That's what made me want to do it as well to start. And,
so the notion that you could play for unlimited upside.
Yes, and also know I could lose. Like
it seemed very appealing to me, as it did to you.
100%. So you're there at Leg Mason. My God, that's a name of the past. And then you're making your next move, right? Which supposedly, from what I understand, is another one of your significant mentors, Mark Gibson, right? How did that happen? Was it one of those taps again, or
again? So I would say moment number 2. Well, this is another great moment that we talk about, where you say stuff happens in your life that you don't plan on, right? I met Mark at a Chinese restaurant, Shunli Palace.
Yep.
In 1997. And at the time, he had a company that had 50 employees in it. It had 3 offices. And I had been in the brokerage business for about 4 years. And, Mark, at that dinner table was talking about opening an office in New York. Yeah, he had wanted me to come over and help him do that. And, he said something at the table that, resonated with me, which he said, I'm trying to build the best company in the country, not necessarily the biggest, but just the best. And he started at that time talking about the connection between debt and investment sales. And he was truly a pioneer in that thought, as was Ben Lambert at Easthill. And, Mark and Ben truly saw this way before anyone else saw it. I mean, it became obvious later and everybody else started doing it. But anyway, halfway through that meal, I just said, whatever this guy is doing and wherever he's going, I want to be part of that. So that decision got made halfway through the entree. Before they served the entrees, I already said, I'm following this guy.
Yeah, it's great because you believed in him that he could do it, and that you want, again, it's that entrepreneurial feeling that we want to be around, right? Whether it's a big company that has entrepreneurialism within it, or it's, something like that is going to be brand new and you have a chance to take it to whatever level, not knowing, right? It's always the unknown.
And you're saying something there that I think is critical, is that I tell all these young people and anybody I come in contact with, this is all about people.
Yep.
The people you work with, who your clients are, who your friends are, it's all about everything's about people. And you're making, in your lifetime, you're making bets on people. That's all you're doing. We're all making calculated bets. We're making calculated bets on our wives, on who they are, on our friends and our business partners, on our clients. We're making these decisions based on the quality of the people and how strongly we feel about them.
100%. It's amazing. Because I remember back, we've known each other for so long, and you always had your 5-8 quality clients, and you always used to tell me that's all I need. Like, we're everyone in that business, and we're going to talk next on how big that business got. Everyone thinks more is better, and like, I'm a firm believer, less is more. Write the note, the personal note. Pay attention to who your clients are. Be with them. Get to know them. Because that's where all your other clients are going to come from, most likely anyway. If you look at the two best things that happened to you in your life, it was happenstance. It was by doing the right things every day, and they show up, right? You don't know where they're going to come from, and you don't direct those. You don't. That's not on the plot plan, right? So I love that, and I wholeheartedly believe it. Most of our best deals. How even I met my partner, how I've met most people in my life has been through just doing and believing the next thing's going to show up by taking care of what I'm supposed to take care of.
And it's interesting, John, it's interesting that you go with the less is more theory, because I'm less is more, you're less is more, but that's the opposite of what most people think. And if you go back and look at your resume of accomplishments and the deals that you did, and how those deals came to you. They truly came to you from referrals of existing clients.
That, or you were at something and you met someone that had nothing to do with what you do for a living, and they knew that. And I'm not saying you don't want a daily plan of being in your industry and pushing to get to know, but it's really, you're not selling anything. You're just getting to know people, and then people become why it's fun and why things actually become successful. But listen, you started with this feeling. You wanted to be with this person. I get that. I feel that about everything I've done in my life. But it's one thing to say, okay, I'm going to do it, and then be 50 people, and then end up with 1,000 people across the country, 26 offices, with a new model of investment sales and debt that nobody really realized. So what were the challenges for you? Was there any time where you're like, ready to throw in the towel? Like what? How did you get through? That's hyper growth. That's not, when you look back and look at it, you're like, oh my God, how did that even happen? So what's your thoughts on that?
Well, I think when you love what you do and you're just kind of doing it every day, you don't realize that you're growing necessarily at the pace that you're growing, right? And because we believed in this sort of organic growth model, hiring people out of college, right, and training them and growing up with them and helping them succeed and wanting them to succeed, right? Did we buy some teams along the way? Yeah, we bought some teams along the way. But at the end, the best personnel and the best resources that we had were the guys and gals that grew up in our system. And I think, when you get to 1,000 people, it still always felt like a family, and those still felt small, but it is a lot compared to 50. I think the biggest moment for us was, during the great financial crisis, like it was for everybody else. But I think during the great financial crisis in that 2009 period, which you remember well, there was no credit available. It wasn't a question of cost of capital. There was no capital, zero capital. And the business completely stalled out, right? And I would say from a defining moment standpoint, we were under incredible pressure as an intermediary. If there was no transactional volume, if guys like you aren't doing deals, there's no deals.
Yeah.
And there were no deals. There was no ability to make any money because the business was paralyzed for, a 6 to 8 month period. And I think, our stock price got down to $1. The New York Stock Exchange wanted to delist us because you get delisted when you get to $1.
Yeah.
We fought them off and we wrote letters to them begging them not to do it. They didn't do it, thank goodness. And, we had limited amounts of cash left. And at the end of all of it, transactional volume came back before we ran out of money. But it was really close. And there were definitely some days in 2009 where I was like, we've come to the end here, man. It's been a great run, but we're going to be run over by these macro things that are happening in the world that are out of our control, and it's going to be too overwhelming. And we did everything we could to reduce costs, and and that year somehow by a miracle we actually broke even and didn't lose any money.
Well, you leaned in. I'm sure everyone contributed to not getting something for the whole, right? I mean, when you talk about a family when you're a company, everyone has to pitch in at that point, right?
We all did. We all suspended our compensation.
That's what I mean.
All of us were working for nothing, and we were just doing everything we can to keep the company afloat in hope that the business was going to recover.
It's amazing. You think you get to a certain point and you did it, and then that's why you always just got to be looking around you and seeing what's going on. And I think what's good that you learn when you were at Travelers is that could happen, right? So I'm sure I'm sure there were other companies that did go away. You didn't, because I'm sure you guys had that mindset to know there could be that day where this could be a problem, right?
There was definitely a bunch of household names that were smaller or mid-sized brokerage firms that got wiped from the face of the earth.
Well, you made it, you got through it, and even if you didn't, you would have figured it out anyway. But thanks to, continuing on, right? You ended up selling to JLL at a $2 billion sale, which is gigantic, in 2019. And now you're back at this big company of where you sort of started. Not that it's not entrepreneurial, because we do a lot of work with we love JLL, great teams all over the world, actually, right? Like lots of facilities management, property management, all leasing, sale, everything, really. It's a conglomerate. So, you finally get your, I guess, payday, supposedly this success feeling that you get. How did it feel? And, what was your mindset at that moment going back into this bigger machine that you had to just be one of a lot of people?
Yeah, it's funny how you think about your life, and I started at a Fortune 500 company,
Yep.
and I ended at a Fortune 500
Yep.
company, right? And 25 years later, or whatever it was, to be part of a machine with 90,000 people. I mean, the first thing I would tell you is JLL is a special place, and it is a world class institution, and they are incredibly great at what they do, and their global platform and the AI and the technology. I mean, there's nothing that they don't have. There's nothing that they don't bring to the table. Research, balance sheet. I mean, it's as strong as a company is or is out there. And
Yep.
if you pay attention to their stock price, it continues to do great, and it's filled with great people.
Yep.
And my days there were fantastic, and I enjoyed being there, and I enjoyed meeting a lot of the people there, and we got some really cool deals done there, and built an even bigger business, because
You could scale it.
the business got bigger by being part of something bigger.
Yeah, well, it's just that whole word of scale, right? Like you were able to scale what was great about what you did.
Yeah, and the truth is that the business was consolidating to a place where owners were doing business with a smaller number of providers. You go back to your less is more, right?
Yep.
And if you own 20 million feet of real estate, and you say, you know what, I'm not going to work with 10 intermediaries. I can't. I don't want to, and I can't. But I'm going to work with 2, or I'm going to work with 3.
Yep.
And by the way, these are the 2 or 3 I'm going to work with. JLL is always in that conversation.
Always in that meeting.
Because they're too good at what they do, and there's too many great people there. But for me, at the end of sort of a 4-year period there, I'd been in the brokerage business a really long time. And I was starting to get a little bit stale, and that little bounce in my step that, I used to have, I was starting to leave me a little bit. And I just felt like, hey, I'm going to be 60 years old here, and I think it's time. I think it's time to exit this business that's been really great to me, that I have enjoyed every moment of, but I'm trying to now look forward about what I want to do with the rest of my life while I'm in good health. And I don't want to do this anymore. So I graciously stepped out of that on my little bit after my 59th birthday.
It's amazing. You had the courage to not let this long, distinguished, up and down, wild moments of a career define you as a person. You had the courage to say, there's other things. If you look at Kroc, Sumner Redstone, like these people started new businesses at 50, 60, Kentucky Fried Chicken, like the list goes, dude. Like it's shocking if you go up, even on one of the LLMs today, ChatGPT or whatever, and say, give me, entrepreneurs that start a business at 50 or 60, and you get a long list. And you think you're done, but then all of a sudden, Blue Light Capital, I mean, you did $51 billion you were involved in of transactions across HFF and JLL. 51 billion, okay? So you should be very proud of that. And it just showed to the scale you were able to, be involved in. You retire. I didn't think that was going to last long personally. John Schultz didn't think that, but that's okay. I didn't want to tell you that because you have to figure that out on your own. And you start 2 things that I want to talk about. Blue Light Capital, which is providing these flexible capital solutions, like you found a niche, middle market, X amount to X amount, like you realize from being at big and being at small and being at middle, the whole thing is like, what are you going to focus on and not be everything to everyone? Less is more. I mean, I want to, people need to understand that you got to have a focus, but at the same time, which I think, giving to the world and the people around you one person at a time is, to me, everything. It makes me the happiest. That's what I want to be known for. And you started BLNext, Blue Light Next, which is a mentoring system. And I'm getting why that's happening. What you said in this podcast about your most fun was college kids coming in. You bought a few groups, but it was more about nurturing people and being around people, and you actually having impact with people, right? And you're continuing that, but in a different way. I think in a way that also can maybe scale after you, right? If you get this thing going right. So talk a little bit about Blue Light, because we want everyone to know who's going to listen to this, what you're doing now and what your focus is. And then, how does BL Next also, be cohesive with this?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. So you're right. It was too early to retire. So that was right. And you were right. I needed to figure that out on my own,
Yes.
which I did. And then, sticking with the less is more theme, John, and discipline and focus. Like, you can't be all things to all people. And, for every new business to start and succeed, you need three things, which I firmly believe. You need a great business plan. You need a great team of people around you, and you need the capital to do the things you need to do. And if you have one out of three or two out of three, you're going to fail. You need all three. So I looked at the marketplace and said, look, there's a void in the market. The local and regional banks are not as strong as they once were. They're not as active as they once were. They're difficult to deal with from a recourse standpoint and insisting on deposits. And many times when they finally offer a piece of debt to somebody, the terms are not overly competitive. And so we identified sort of this $15 to $50 million part of the market as something that was a little underserved and perhaps
Just
not
remember, that's private credit, right? That's
private
private
credit.
lending.
Private credit, unregulated, we're making decisions on our own about the
And with a
things.
balance sheet, or is this
No,
something?
we have a balance sheet. We have a large institutional partner, and we
Okay,
co-invest with them on all these deals together.
good.
So we're able to close rapidly. We're able to make very quick decisions on what we want to do and not do. And we think that that's a really large competitive advantage that we have, relative to people that we compete with in the marketplace. And, we're a bridge lender. We're all asset classes. We're all across the United States. We don't have any legacy assets because we're brand new, so we can focus all of our energy on, brand new originations. And, we opened the doors in March. We built brand new offices on 50th Street here in New York, Midtown. On Monday, we're expanding into California. We're opening an office in Beverly Hills. So the business will be bi-coastal. And, I'm sort of back to the very beginnings of the Dorman Wilson, brand new desk, half a dozen employees, and sort of this, entrepreneurial challenge of wanting to build something again from the ground up and try to scale it. And I think, we've been open for about 7, 8 months. We've got a bunch of deals done and closed, which is unbelievable for a startup business because, since we had the business thesis, the market's become more competitive and the banks have gotten back into the market, which is fine. As you said earlier, you got to consistently adapt to what's going on around you. Great time to be a borrower, great time to be a broker, tough time to be a lender because the markets are so competitive, but we'll meet the market. And I think the edge that we have on most people is because I represented developers for so long and because I was a broker for so long, it's easy for me to understand the perspectives and what's important to everybody to get a deal done. And I think for a lending platform that's really unique. So I think, if you had a deal and you needed a specific business, we understood your business plan, and we
Yep.
have to cater the loan to meet your business plan. It's easy for us to adjust to that stuff because we're not regulated. So that's been great. And look, our goal there is to scale that business so that we're doing $1 billion a year of this stuff.
So think about this, okay? When we first started this conversation, and you said, I thought in 2 years I was going to be that developer. Now, you took a different route. You took the lending sort of, side, right? You didn't take but you own this now. You're investing your own money. You're growing now a new entrepreneurial business. I completely think the niche you're in is exactly where you should be, because that's the biggest part of the market. Everyone wants to do these gigantic deals. I get it. And we've grown and our deals are bigger. But normally they're value add, and they're deals that to acquire them, it's a lot in that size range, right? They get to 200-300 million, hopefully, on the exit. But to get the thing, closed and done, you need someone that understands and trusts that your business plan is going to work, always with variation, right? So that's tremendous. And, opening a new office is tremendous. So here you go again. So BLNext, was that before? Was that after?
Well,
Why did you associate the names?
BLNext was first.
But what? Okay, so you associate the other name with BLNext. Is it Blue Light as well, or?
It's BL, Blue Light Next, and Next stands for the next generation of industry leaders.
Oh, I love that. That.
And so what I did when I went home after the quote unquote retirement, I said sports, kids, education, real estate. 4 things I'm really passionate about. And I said, how do we mold this into a singular concept? Right? And, when I was at HFF and I was at JLL, we had tremendous success in hiring collegiate and pro athletes. Right? And what we found in the athletes was that the DNA of an athlete is generally very different than the athlete of someone that didn't play sports. Because athletes, you don't have to explain to them about hard work. You don't need to. They're wired really differently, right? They collaborate well. They're resilient as heck. They're accustomed to winning and losing and getting back up, right? Which is
failure
at the heart of our business, right? They work well with other people because they've always been on teams, right? And most importantly, they want to win, and they're really competitive people, right? And so I said to myself, these athletes make great professionals in the real estate space, but many of them, because they were so busy playing sports, don't have the technical skills because they didn't have the time to prepare themselves in college because they were too busy playing sports.
Yeah.
So BLNext at its core basically is taking the DNA of an athlete, arming them with the technical skills to succeed in the form of 150 hours of Excel and Argus training, right? So that when they get ready to go into the job market, they can talk to somebody like you and say, hey, John, I played football at such and such a school and I'm a total stud, but on top of that, my technical skills are equal to or better than anyone you're considering hiring. That's a really compelling business proposition. And so our mentoring program is basically one where if you played football, you get assigned a mentor who also played football, who's now a successful person in the real estate business. And that's someone that's available to you for 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, all year long. We've been open for about a year and a half, and we have 172 athletes from all across the U.S., all genders, all sports, 66 different universities across the country. And what we found is there is a tremendous need for what we're doing. The athletes want it, and more importantly, the employers want it. The employers are excited about hiring our kids coming out of our program. We have about 25 corporate relationships right now. We could have 100 if we wanted to, because everybody seems to be enamored with the idea of hiring athletes. And, this is a complete nonprofit initiative. It's something that it's a 501c3 that I've been financing out of my own pocket. And the reason I'm doing it, John, is like you, the industry that we have participated in has been really good to us.
Yeah.
Really good to us. And I want young people to get into the business. And anything that I'm able to do to help young people get into this business so they can succeed the way you and I did, I'm game on, and I want to do it to the best of my ability. And so I think you said something that triggered me. It was my dad and the social work. Somewhere deep inside me is this idea of trying to help others.
100%.
And I think as you get to the back end of your life, and I know you said you've had 80 of these, I'm sure somewhere in the core of all of these 80 people that you've spoken to, there is a deep philanthropic side of them that is highly committed to trying to help other people.
Every one of them, as successful as everyone is, from, sports, entertainment. If you look at the guests I've had on, they've done all different things, from restaurants to real estate to everything. And that's what makes them feel good. And listen, I'm doing this podcast for one reason. This is not even a nonprofit. This is a no profit. I'm doing it because, first of all, I get to meet people I never would. I love stories. It motivates me. And I think I always said, if one person changes their life by listening to one statement of how many ever I do, then it's worth it. Very low expectations, but I'm hoping, it's more than that, but that's what keeps me going. So this is my way of trying to help somehow, shape, or form. So.
Well, John, you're doing amazing work, and listen, I've known you such a long time. You're such a great friend, and you've lived your life the right way, and you've done all the right things and made all the right moves, and it's nice to see you helping other people, and it's nice to see you doing so great.
Well, I want to just thank you for being on this podcast, and I see Blue Light as being something. I mean, listen, if you're going to start it now in a market, we're in that next cycle, right? We're in it. We're raising our next fund right now because we're in that 12, 14 year cycle that it starts all over again. And with AI, with all the different changes, with how people occupy space, with what is an office building, what is a distribution center, right? Even hotels and data centers and everything that our world needs us to be good at so that they can be good at what they do. I think it's very exciting time. So I'm glad you're doing this. People want to learn more about Blue Light. Is it a bluelight.com? What's your website?
Oh, it's Blue Light Capital RE.
And what about social media? You got your social media going yet?
Yeah, we're pretty much on LinkedIn and Instagram. We're easy to find. And
okay, good. Well, thank you again, and it was very fun speaking with you today.
John, thanks so much, man. Have a great day. Thanks for having me on the show.